All right, what is up, Instagram and YouTube family? My name is Dr. Megan here for the PT on Ice Daily Show. It is Leadership Thursday. Really excited to be coming to you guys this morning to talk about boundaries and burnout, kind of mixed with hustle and grace, but boundaries and burnout. I did a podcast a while ago on this I got a lot of good feedback from, so I decided to do it again and put out a bunch of questions. Before I really get rolling with this too much, I know I'm helping out with Extremity here in Phoenix, Arizona, or it's actually in Tempe, but same thing. Not this coming weekend, but next weekend. So I'm not sure if there's spots left, but check that out. I know we have a ton of courses coming up. So I'm going to jump right in this to try to avoid going way over my time. So I got a bunch of questions. They were actually really good ones, and they were already along the lines of what I had written up. So I'm just going to read those out and then just go through them. So the first one, and I think this is a huge thing that people are wondering these days, because we have hustle culture and we have grace culture, and they seem so polarizing. So the question I got was the ratio of hustle versus grace. What is optimal? Well, the tough part of this is there is an optimal, but it's going to look vastly different for every single person. And it's going to look very different even for the same individual at various times in their lives. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be like large chunks, but we have phases in our life where maybe we have to be in a little bit more of a hustle phase for a period of time, and then we need to be in a little bit more of a grace phase. And so being able to recognize when those moments are can be very challenging, especially with social media. I feel like it's really easy to get caught in that comparison trap by watching other people who are really in a phase for themselves that promotes one or the other. I know with ICE, we have a lot of really, really like high producing people. And so it can be easy to look at what they're doing and be like, I should be doing more. So the first thing that I want to talk about is really catching yourself when you use the phrase I should. Start getting curious about why you feel that way. And in that moment, what does your intuition actually say that you want or need to be doing? Not what you should be doing, not what is compared to someone else, not what's the societal expectation or a familial expectation or anything like that. Like, what is it actually that you truly want or need to be doing in that moment? And I think that's a huge step to realizing where you need to be in that hustle versus grace. And part of that's going to also be being brutally honest with yourself in those answers. You'll know, like, if you see someone producing a ton and you know that you're not quite running at the capacity that you could, there's going to be like a guilt gut punch. Now, the caveat to that is if you are going through a really hard time. I know me personally, when I was going through a lot of grief a couple of years ago, it was really hard to not feel guilty for not doing more. But deep down, I knew that that wasn't what I needed at the time. I needed rest, I needed recovery. So being brutally honest with yourself in those moments is going to be a huge piece of it. And I also want to say, I don't think extremes never work for anything, whether it's politics or working out or hustle and grace. Like, you need recovery days, same as we take deload weeks so that our physical body can rest and recover and the muscles can break down and build back up. Like, our mental and emotional health need that as well. So I feel like even if you are in a hustle phase, the message that ends up getting portrayed on social media is that it's constant hustle 24/7. Think of it more as constant productivity. And then that begs the question of, are you productive or are you busy? Because those are two vastly different things. You can be incredibly busy and not be that productive. And I'd be willing to bet that almost everyone that listens to this knows what I mean when I say that. So again, it goes back to being brutally honest with yourself. And are you really being intentionally productive, or are you just loading your plate with various things? And that could be, maybe you're saying yes to too many opportunities that really aren't in alignment with where you want to be. And so you end up just scrambling and being busy all the time. Same could be said for if you end up saying yes to too many social engagements. I think that's where the next question, I'll dive into that a little bit more. So really being honest with yourself of, if you're running really hot, you can do that for a period of time, but you can't do that for forever. You just can't. Like, even I know Jeff talked about last Thursday how passion allows you to kind of avoid burnout. I agree to an extent. Because I do think you need to be a passionate person in order to break through those upper limits. If you've read Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, I believe his name is, he talks about upper limits and how they're mostly created by ourselves. And it's the ceiling that we place on ourselves. And so if you are a super passionate person, it's going to be much, much easier for you to break through those limits and see new opportunities and move that ceiling up higher. With that said, you still need that rest and recovery. Like, you can't get away with it, same as you can't get away with it in the gym. Like, at some point you'll be able to get away with it for a while. Like, you can go ham in the gym, you are going to burn out. Same thing happens, whether it be career, life, anything, that still happens. So being able to recognize the signs that you need to scale back, or just going ahead and preemptively doing it. And this could be super small. For example, I have tried to do cold plunges a little bit more often. One, because it's the only way I sit still. Two, it's productive, quote unquote, rest or recovery. So it falls under the recovery bucket. It's great for mental health. It's relatively time efficient. If you listen to Huberman Lab podcast, he talks about, if it's for mental health, having the concept of going through walls instead of a specific time domain, but it's still not going to be more than, like, say 10, 15 minutes max. So having those little moments. I would also say we all know the benefits of getting outside in nature and walking. So even if you're in a hustle phase, like, having those moments throughout your day where you allow yourself to put the work aside and just spend 10 minutes walking outside or 10 minutes connecting with a friend. Because I think the bigger thing to think about is the balance between our intentional connection, our intentional solo time, because I think that is very, very important for rest and recovery, and then intentional productivity, and making sure that, like, maybe one's going to be more prevalent and take more priority for a season of your life, but you still need all three of those. You can't completely let them go by some go by the wayside to boost one. And it's just that ratio. So maybe you're in a hustle phase right now. Maybe you really need rest. So if you've been going, so, like, use that gym example again. If you push too hard for too long and you crash, you're going to need a longer recovery period than if you just took a little bit of time to preemptively do it. Same thing goes when we're talking hustle versus grace. So I don't know, there is an optimal, but it's such a variable answer depending on where you are in life, that there isn't a one size fits all response there. It really is the matter of sitting back, and I would highly recommend getting very, very honest with yourself as to where you're at and what is best for you in that moment, while also considering, like, how can I make little steps towards where I want to be without affecting my mental and emotional health. So I know that's kind of a vague answer, but it's the best that I can think of as how to, like, start to recognize and, well, kind of ironically, like, give yourself grace for wherever you are in that. I will also make a quick note. If you feel like you're a little bit more of a grace phase, totally fine. It's really, really good for you to be there if that's what you need. I also want you to be cautious of doing what one of my friends, Lindsay Swartz here in Phoenix, calls the cute quit. So don't, like, also hold yourself accountable. So on the hustle phase, like, recognize when you're going to go towards burnout. On the grace side of things, recognize when you are giving yourself a little too much slack and not holding yourself accountable. So if you're catching yourself being like, oh, well, you know what, it's just not the season right now, or, you know what, I just don't have the time, or, oh, I have, like, any of those kind of little excuses, which the dangerous part is they might be valid. They might be something where an outsider that's listening to you is like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Though, deep down if that is the truth or if you could be doing more. And that's where it's that give and take. All right. Also, I'm going to go ahead and throw out my Instagram tag will be in the comments here. I love talking about this stuff. So if you have any questions about this or anything else I go over, please reach out to me. So the next question that I got, and I think a lot of us, it kind of goes right in line with this. So the next question is, how do you manage your business, teaching, coaching, fitness, your blog, everything without hitting overwhelm? The first thing that I want to mention here is trying to get away from the word overwhelm. In Brene Brown's newest book, Atlas of the Heart, she talks about how overwhelm is just carries this connotation with it where it's basically saying that you cannot do anything about it. It is so big that it is not possible for you to rectify the situation. So that word in of itself is kind of defeating versus if you just use the word stressed. Still has a negative connotation with it for the most part, but it's manageable. So that would be step one is start trying to get away from using the word overwhelm and then also start to recognize of have you created a little bit of an identity with how busy you are. Again, going back to like you can absolutely be busy without being productive. And I know plenty of people that almost use that as a coping mechanism. This also fits with that hustle and grace thing. So if you're busy just for the sake of being busy, and or to avoid something else that's going on, whether it be current or past traumas that and like that inner child shadow work, that kind of stuff. If there's something that you're avoiding and your way of avoiding it is to be busy, then yeah, you're probably going to feel quote unquote overwhelmed. And what you'll notice is everyone around you knows it too. Meaning people will talk to you in a certain way. They will say, "Oh, I know you're really busy, but do you have a second for this?" Or, "Oh, I know you have a lot going on." Or, "Oh, you know what? Let's not even bother John. He's overwhelmed right now." If you start noticing that kind of speech around you, I want you to take a step back and think about how am I perpetuating this, whether it be subconscious or not. But there's something that you were doing, there's something you were getting from being busy or overwhelmed. Okay, so how do I personally manage 5,000 things without hitting overwhelm? For starters, I'm human, so I do hit stress points a lot. I think the biggest thing, so some people love time blocking. I think if you haven't tried that, by all means, that is a phenomenal way. The vast majority of people do very well with that. I'm an Enneagram type 7. I don't know how much of that really correlates with this, but I just know that myself and the other type 7s I know tend to not do well with time blocking. It's almost like we try to fight ourselves on it for some weird reason. Every time I time block, I end up shifting things around and it never works. So what I have done is I will the night before I'll create like a need to do list. Like here's the things that really need to get done. Here are the things that would be nice to get done and here's the things that can wait. And then I have that all laid out. That has been hugely helpful for me and it doesn't lock me into a specific time to get them done the next day, but it also helps prioritize so that I can then recognize if I start getting sidetracked, which is easy. I absolutely have squirrel brain. Then I can get back on track. So I think that's a huge one. I also think it is important to, again, take those little bits of time to either connect with others and solo time. I personally need solo time. That goes back to those cold plunges, a little walk outside to reset and then be able to refocus on the next task that I have on hand. And then managing all those things also goes back to like there's going to be seasons where one takes a little bit more priority, one might fall off a little bit, but just trying to figure out like what works best for you and what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So like for me running my business, I need to have a blog or I need to show up online in some way, shape, or form. My blog is turned to quarterly because I did get more stressed when I was trying to do that monthly with everything. My coaching ramped down so that I could ramp up teaching. Like it's a give and take with everything and finding what works best for you and having some sort of like way to list out priorities and follow and be able to stick with that. Also having a support system, have one or two people that will hold you accountable and ask where you're at with things. That's huge. Okay. Already 15 minutes in. I'm going to try to be quick here. So the last three actually all kind of coincide. So I had someone ask this question, and I know that this is a very passionate person. So why does burnout keep happening no matter how much I cut back on work? And then the next two, because I'm going to go through all these at the same time. How do you get out of your own way to create the life you want? And then how do you realize your current job isn't serving you and how to step into your power or your passion? So with these, I think it's very important to be brutally honest with yourself with what you want to do, not what you feel like you should, especially with PTs. We have this big, fancy, very expensive degree, and it's really to it, and we're like, you know what? Is this the right thing for me? I think it's really important to brain dump all of your thoughts on that because while I'll use myself as a personal example, while I am very passionate about physical therapy, and early on, I was very passionate about being a clinician and being in the clinic and hands-on. That has shifted a little bit over time. I am more passionate now, still about PT, but about the education side of things, both on the student physical therapist side of things and also on educating the general public side of things versus that one-on-one in-person clinic care. It's not to say that I don't still love it and appreciate it. It's just not where I am best served all of the time. Like, it is not the number one area where my passion should be focused. And that's a tough thing to admit when you've spent years and thousands of dollars on a degree. But if you fight it, you will not do well and you will hit burnout more. I'm this particular person that asked that question, and I've gotten asked that before, all by very passionate people. Jeff talked about in his speech the last Thursday, how very passionate people do tend to run hot and they need people around them to help reel them in. I think this is very much true, and that's where that happens because it's also really easy as a very passionate person to go headfirst into the wrong direction. Or not necessarily the wrong, yeah, it is the wrong direction, but it might just be really close to what it should be, but not quite. That also goes right in line with when it's time to like pivot on your career or recognize it. So I really want everyone to go Google Design Your Life TED Talk and listen to it. So in that, he gives a 3-part exercise where you write out in detail your future. The first one being if you continued with where you're at currently. The second one being if that were no longer an option, what would you do? And the third, he calls a wild card. It's if you had all the time and money in the world and nothing else mattered, like what would you choose to do with it? What would you choose to do with your life path at that point? And then just watch the TED Talk, but it goes into like how to maybe recognize which one of those really is where you are meant to be and what you should pursue, and or how to combine them. So again, that and not or mentality of how to take maybe there is an aspect of where you're at that you really enjoy, but you are doing too much in one area of it that doesn't fit. So maybe you have been a clinician and you would be better served with your unique greatness in a more of a managerial role. Conversely, maybe you've moved to a director role and you're realizing that your greatness really lies in that clinical care. But that's just a really easy example, but I think it drives home the point of there are different skill sets and different greatnesses that work better or do better and are able to actually use their passion as they want in various ways. So you can still be passionate about physical therapy, and it's going to look vastly different on how that plays out best for you in order to avoid burnout. Um, and then also the other thing, so if you haven't read Art of the Impossible, there's also a drill in there where it talks about 42. It's an asinine number of listing out things that if you had all the free time in the world, what would you want to research and talk about? And then recognizing the patterns. So I bet for most people on here, physical therapy is going to be a strong one or something with physical health. But it's a great way to start to recognize and realize if maybe there's a slight pivot that would be better serving for you to use that passion and avoid burnout. Because really, it does all come back to like if you are moving in the right direction of what you're passionate about and finding that balance of hustle and grace, you can avoid burnout. Otherwise, you might need to, especially those of you who are more on the hustle side of things, like boundaries. Hold boundaries with yourself is probably the most important to be able to move forward in those. So again, look up Design Your Life TED Talk. You can look up Art of the Impossible or just listen to chapter 1. I believe that's where that exercise is. And that will give you a good idea of being able to kind of write out and see, is your current job really serving you, and how to step into your power or your passion. I think both of those have been monumental exercises. And then really sitting back and getting very honest with yourself with that hustle versus grace and where you're at in that. So hope this was helpful. Yeah, I'm excited to see all of you guys at a future ICE course, hopefully. So happy Thursday.